Hey BookTube, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for my wrap-up. So, the month, technically, when I'm filming this is not over yet, but I figure just in case I'll go ahead and film this now. So, let's talk about the books that I read, and then I will also talk about, I finally went for my first trip back to the library, so I'll talk about that because one of those books is part of my wrap-up. And although I'm not technically finished with it, I'm very close to finishing with it, but I want to get, like I said, I wanted to film this now. And then I will also talk about the books that I bought this month as well. So let's get started, shall we? So the first book I read was a book that I started, actually, I think back in 2019, I think it was, when I started this book. And I finally finished it this month, and that is Stephen King's Needful Things. So, first of all, King is so good at writing small town stories and the darker sides of small towns. Of course, this one is set in Maine. And you have the town of Castle Rock, and this man has arrived in their town, and he buys one of the local empty stores, which if you've read the short story The Sundog, then that references the building in this book that becomes the store Needful Things. And it is run by Mr. Leland Gaunt, who's this little weird, eccentric old man who, he seems very charming on the surface, but whenever people meet him, there's a darkness to him that they recognize, but then he ends up he is able to charm them. So, his store, Needful Things, provides you whatever you desire, whatever you think you need. And instead of asking for money, he will ask you to do him a little bit of a favor. A favor that involves pulling a prank on one of the other residents of the town, and he makes it pass off as harmless, just all in good fun. But of course, this is Stephen King. He writes horror, he's known for mostly horror, not all the time, obviously. There's a couple of his books that aren't horror. It's not just a harmless prank. And slowly, the town, he influences and infects everybody in this town, and slowly the town just goes mad, and falls into chaos. And this is such, like I said, Stephen King knows how to write a story about a small town with all these shadows, and he really helps you get to know the characters to the point where you even kind of understand these characters that you don't always agree with, or these characters that do horrible things and are just bad people, aren't nice people. You can understand them and their motivations. You may not agree with them, and you may be disgusted by them, or even downright hate them, but you understand them because he has to get to know the characters. He's telling you everything about them, all their quirks, all their habits, all their deep, dark secrets, all about their relationships with other people. He just has you really get to know them inside and out. Now, our main character in this book is Alan Pangborn, who is you are technically you're first introduced to him not in this book, but in The Dark Half, which I got from the library. And that actually was an accident because, that's when I started wanting to get more into Stephen King, reading more of his books. And I did know that all of his books most of his books are interlinked. In some way mostly through characters and places. And Alan Pangborn is kind of introduced first in that novel, The Dark Half. But he is a secondary character. He's not the main character. He's the main character in this book. One of the main characters. And he's the town sheriff. He's an everyday kind of guy, but of course he has his own, issues that kind of have to do with the events of the Dark Half, which I think you could get away with not reading the Dark Half first and still be able to get this book and understand, because he does talk about those things that are in the Dark Half. He mentions them, but for context sake, it could help to read the Dark Half first, so you at least know what's going on. But you could get away with, but at the same time, I think you could get away with not reading it if you're not interested in that plot. But he's the only one who has avoided throughout the whole book going to Gaunt's little shop, Needful Things. He has not gone there. Even his girlfriend, Alan Pangborn's girlfriend, in this book goes there herself and gets help from Gaunt to help her with her. I think she has arthritis, and he gives her something that helps her arthritis. It doesn't entirely make it go away, but it helps to make it less painful. And of course, like I said, he asks her to do something for him that has dire consequences. But he is Gaunt. Not Gaunt. I'm not gonna talk about Gaunt just yet. I'm finished talking about Pangborn. Pangborn is, I think he's a very likable character. He's very relatable. I mean, I think a lot of these characters are relatable on some level, even the ones that are really bad people. But he is, he's likable, he's relatable, you feel sympathy for him knowing about his past and what you find out about him. You understand him. He's an everyman kind of hero. In fact, when I was reading it, I always try to picture actors that I would cast in these roles if this was made into a movie, which actually I think it has been made into a movie, but that years ago, probably in early 90s or 80s. And so I'm thinking about today's Hollywood, who I would cast. And I kept picturing Ben McKenzie in his Jim Gordon role as Alan Pangborn. That's why I kept thinking, that's who I was picturing, because I could see him doing that kind of, and maybe that's because so far seems like 2 or 3 times, actually I think 3 times now, including Jim Gordon, he's played a cop. So it would kind of fit, although I wonder if now Ben McKenzie feels like he's been typecast. Although in Gotham he did get to do a lot of interesting stuff. But anyway, but that's my picture is Alan Pangborn. I don't know about the rest of the cast though, and I kept going back for the different actors for Gaunt. In fact, when I first saw this book and was deciding if I was going to read this one or The Stand, I kept thinking for Gaunt, Mr. Gold from Once Upon a Time. So Robert Carlyle as Mr. Gaunt. The problem is that I think Gaunt's supposed to have an American accent. He's supposed to be American because this is set in Maine. And Robert Carlyle is a Scottish actor, so, could he do an American accent? But I think his character, Mr. Gold, would kind of reminded me a little bit of Gaunt. So let's talk about Gaunt. He is such a creepy antagonist / villain. He's one of King's more supernatural villains, but he looks like a normal guy throughout, and he's just a creepy old man. And like I said, there's something about him that's a little off, and it's very subtle. He's very subtle. He seems charming. He's just a sweet old man. I mean, he's just a nice old man, but he kind of, there's this darkness beneath him, underneath the surface. It's like the old iceberg metaphor of, you see a line above the surface, but underneath the surface, there's 10 times more there. And he is just so compelling as a villain and kind of, very scary, and you're just drawn to him. Both the reader and the character are just drawn to him as a character. I think he makes a great villain. And I like how one of the characters, I can't remember which one, is talking to him. He's having him do things for him, and he's like his little assistant, and I think it's that character. And he's like, I need you, and he's hesitant to do anything for Gaunt at first, and then Gaunt is like, he gives him a time limit, like, you have to do this thing and be back here within a certain time. And he's like, and what if I don't? Like, well, you don't want to see me angry. You don't want to make me angry. You don't want to know what happens when that happens. You don't want to know what's going to happen if you make me angry. And he's like thinking, I don't know if he says this out loud or if he's thinking it, but he's like the Hulk kind of thing, which I thought that was really funny. There was like a Hulk reference. Which I think King does that, you know, he puts a lot of references of stuff that he grew up with, but not too many pop culture, it's not oversaturated with pop culture references, but every so often, you know, he talks, especially because he, you know, when he writes teen characters or kid characters, which he writes a lot about that, and there are some kid characters in this, and, you know, young adult characters, and then, so, you know, King, like I said, he creates such a great creepy atmosphere in this book, and the slow descent of this town, like, it starts out subtle, and then, you know, and then it just grows and grows until it reaches, like, chaos point by the climax of the book, and everything's just falling apart. Everyone's trying to kill each other and chase each other, and you know, God just preys on their desires and their fears, and he twists things and just makes them think, and even if it's illogical to think certain things about certain people, they're just so messed up and so determined to believe it, that, you know, because the whole time I was thinking of the book is like, that doesn't make any sense. How could that character do that? But there's no reasoning with these characters because they're too far gone to really be like, okay, think about this for a minute, just for a minute. You know, how is that possible? You know, and this is just so good. And so far, this is probably my second favorite King, next to it. Although I would have to think about it. I would love to do, I would love to do I know there's the whole tier ranking thing. I might check that out one day. I'd love to, either way, I would love to do a list of trying to figure out which Stephen King books are my favorites so far that I've read. I think this would be second place. Okay, and then next, so actually, just as I was about to talk to you guys about that book, I just realized that's technically not the first book that I finished. I don't think. So, yeah, it's not, I don't think it is because it's towards the end, I figure, but, so I'm not talking about these in I'm not talking about these in order, actually, technically. So the next one I'm going to talk about is The Velveteen Daughter by Laurel Davis Huber. So when I was growing up, one of my favorite stories was The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams Bianco. And this is her story along with her daughter, Pamela Bianco, who's a famous artist. And it's their story. In fact, the Velveteen Rabbit only plays a small role in this story. Like, you get how Marjorie writing the story and her publishing it, but it's not the most important aspect of the plot. Which I need to check something real quick. Because I swear and you do actually get snippets. Okay, so for some reason I was thinking her name was Margaret, but it's Marjorie. You get snippets actually from her reading the book to her family, The Velveteen Rabbit, which I think is a beautiful story. I definitely recommend it for kids. So first, before I start talking about the book, let me tell you about The Velveteen Rabbit. It's, like I said, it's a story about, obviously, a velveteen rabbit that this little boy receives as a gift, and he loves the rabbit very much. And the rabbit, like in Toy Story, the rabbit and all the other toys kind of come alive. And he makes friends with this patchwork horse, rocking horse. And the horse, he asks the horse about becoming real. And the horse says, you have to become real, you must be beloved really strongly by your owner to eventually become real. So that's the Velveteen Rabbit story about, this boy loving this Velveteen Rabbit and the rabbit's relationship with the horse and the boy. Is a very sweet story. So now the Velveteen Daughter is the story of Marjorie. Like I said, Marjorie and her daughter Pamela. And we go back and forth between Marjorie and Pamela, their perspective of these events of the story. Like, it's mostly significant events of their lives, with a particular focus on Pamela and her becoming famous. Her father, Francesco, recognizes how talented she is at a young age. She is a child prodigy, and he even introduces her to Picasso. Now, I believe that's one of the events that was exaggerated or didn't happen in the book. There is actually a thing in the back that talks about some of the events that were, not real, that were added by Laurel. Let's find that. Let's see. Let me find that. I'm trying to find. Okay, so Picasso was a friend of the family. And the woman, his girlfriend, was a real person. But yeah, the time when they come to dinner was imagined. So that scene in the book is imagined, but they were friends with Picasso. And she becomes very famous and well known all over Europe. And then eventually they are invited to America by a famous American woman. I don't remember who it was, but I don't know if it's an actress or someone, but they were invited to America, and I was supposed to say Laurel, and Pamela is, it's all about how Pamela she becomes famous, but she's only doing it for her father, and to make him happy. And it's about the struggle that her and her mom have with Francesco, and her relationships, not just with her family, but the three men in her life. Like when she's like 14, she falls in love with this older young man I think he's 20 when they're friends, and when she develops this infatuation with him, and he doesn't return it. He just sees her as this little sister. And let me see if I can find his name. Oh, Dickon. That's right. I cannot believe I didn't forget, because it kept making me think of Secret Garden. Dickon from Secret Garden. Dickon, who I think he's a writer. Yeah, I think he was a writer. And she was infatuated with him, and was completely in love with him and wanted to marry him and stuff. And she didn't understand that he did not feel the same way. He just saw her as like a little sister. And there's another guy who comes into her life, Robert, that she ends up eloping with and has a child with. And it's so heartbreaking with her innocence and naivety. And she's someone I kind of connected with in that way. Not necessarily I'm no artist. And my dad doesn't live vicariously through me. And, and he isn't. And then I didn't go through the hardships that she went through, but I do experience anxiety and, naivety and feeling and kind of being a dependent of your parents. I think I definitely relate to that aspect of Pamela. And then I remember being just very frustrated with Pamela and Marjorie because they never stood up to Francesco. I think that's how you say it. Because they loved him and wanted to make him happy, but he wasn't considering their happiness. He just assumed that they were cool with this. And in the few times that Marjorie got mad at him and had enough, he would just charm his way back into her heart and gain her forgiveness. But then he would turn around and do something else that would kind of mess with their lives a little bit. And the problem is he wasn't a bad guy, and he wasn't he wasn't a jerk or anything. He wasn't abusive or anything. He was just misguided and very selfish. And both of them had a hard time because they were there's a scene when she's talking to Dickon, and he's very frustrated. Dickon is very frustrated with her and does not understand why she's not painting for herself. She's only painting for her public and for her father. And Dickon, to me, the impression I get is he put the women in his life, including Pamela, on a pedestal. He had these expectations for them to be what he wanted them to be. And he didn't understand how hard it was for Pamela, or for the other woman in his life, I think her name was Jane, how hard it was for them to live up to his expectations. And Pamela it was not easy for her to stand up to her father. She was very vulnerable and young and wanted to please him. She was definitely a very people-pleasing person. And she wasn't a strong, confident young woman. And she also probably didn't understand what it looked like to other people that weren't like her adoring fans, to the people in her life, how she couldn't understand that they just saw her as, she was just trying to please her. She wasn't doing this for herself. And that's what, as a good artist, so people say you should create art for yourself first and foremost. And she wasn't doing that. She was just, it's not easy to be like, no, I'm not going to create this for you. This is for me. I'm not going to do what you want me to do. It's not just a simple task to do, and Dickon never understood that. And I also felt bad for, like I said, I think her name was Jane, the woman he was kind of flirting with a little bit, although I believe she was a married woman. And she worked a ranch. She loved taking care of animals, she loved her ranch, taking care of horses, and he saw that as silly. He's like, why, you're not doing anything with your life, you're just playing with animals, you're just, how is this doing anything? How is this impacting the world? And this is what she was passionate about. This is what she cared about. And Dickon was kind of an ass to both of them in this one scene. But it's so heartbreaking to see what Pamela, and Marjorie too, goes through. Marjorie is trying so hard to be a good mother and to protect her children, but being a good wife to her husband at the same time, which sometimes can, if there's, but is not always easy depending on your, if your family's not in sync with each other, which I feel like this father and daughter, on the surface it seemed like they were. But at the end of the day, like I said, Pamela was only doing it for her father to please him, but she wasn't doing it for herself. There was no good balance in the family. But anyway, so the writing itself is good, and I kind of like that it goes back and forth, but then, and it adds some mystery, and it makes you want to keep reading, because you don't get the full story. You just get a brief hint of what's to come, and, you get the parts of it, but you don't get the whole picture until later, which it keeps you reading, but it's also frustrating and made me impatient, because I just wanted to know. And there were times when there were parts of the story that I was more interested in others. So, I mean, it's still, I love this, but at the same time, there were moments of, I don't care about that. I just want to get the rest of this part of the story. Like, I want to know why. Which, again, it kept you reading at the same time. So, it's a very, like, good and bad thing, I think. But it's, if you grew up reading the Velveteen Rabbit, then you might be interested in this. Just hearing the story of the author, unless you just don't care. But like I said, I'm one of those people who is intrigued and wants to know about the artists that created these works that I enjoy. Even if they're not always, whether they're a nice person or not. Now, they're obviously nice people. They were obvious, because sadly they're both gone from this world, but they were nice people. And I would love to read some more of, maybe even one day read it to my niece and nephews. I know they do have Velveteen Rabbit. They do have a copy of that. And I'll just see Pamela's artwork. You do get, I think, where is it? In the, okay, yeah, in the back, you do get a little snippet of some of the artwork, and you get pictures of the people and their, the family, and, Dickon, here's, although dude needs the eyebrow. He's not, as far as looks, he's not as appealing looks-wise in this picture. But it shouldn't be, of course it shouldn't be about looks, it should be about personality, too. But, you get these pictures, and then here's some of Pamela's artwork, but I would love to see more of it. And see it, like, in person, if anything, I don't know if I would ever be able to see it in person. I don't know where it is. And I think this is her little book that she wrote for kids. Just a little alphabet book that she made. But this is such an interesting, this is so good, and like I said, if you grew up reading, if you're familiar with the Velveteen Rabbit, like I said, you might find this really interesting. Okay, and then I also finally finished The Valor, the second book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, which this one picks up right where the first one left off. So the first book is Malice, and it's in this world where there are giants and humans, and their world is, of course, ruled by kings, because most fantasy stories are based on kind of a medieval Renaissance setting. And there's this prophecy that's coming true. This prophecy about how the two gods of this world, Elion and Azeroth, they will pick avatars, or vessels, who will take their place. The bright star and the black sun. I always have to check and see if I got those correct. What's the map? Okay, here it is. Okay, yeah, the black sun, and then the bright star. And, that has come to pass. That is starting to come to pass. And a war has begun. So there are it's a multi-perspective story with a lot of characters. You have Corbin and his sister Saigon, who get mixed up in all this. And you have Prince Nefer, who believes he might be the bright star, but that's debatable. And he's this young prince who finally wants to claim his father's throne, but his father won't walk away from it. And there's a lot of other characters. There's a character that becomes a mentor to Corbin. He has this mysterious past. And he's trying to train Corbin how to be a warrior, and you have Corbin's parents, and you have so many characters that become enemies, characters that are siblings. So my favorites so far are Corbin, Cywin, Corlin, who I don't think is introduced until this book, Gar, and Verdes. Those are some of my favorite characters. And I also love that there's giants that are introduced in this series, that they play a main part in this. They are usually sidekick characters, or characters that are used by both the good guys and the bad guys, to fight in, like, if there's a war going on. In this one, they play a major role on this story and the prophecy. So this one picks up where they left off. Cywin plays a bigger role in this book. And Corbin, he's caught in the middle of this, caught in the middle of the destiny of the prophecy. And like I said, Nothair thinks he is the bright star. So he's being led to one of these special treasures that aren't used to fulfill the prophecy. He's being led to those to gather one of those treasures, particularly the cauldron, which could help them in the war. There's characters that are, questioning, aren't sure whose side, or going back and forth on whose side they are, and questioning themselves and thinking, am I on the right side? And, trying to justify their actions, particularly Verdes. There's also this whole, fighting pits thing that I think is really kind of interesting, because it looks at morality and how the idea of survival, and how sometimes you have to, in these kinds of worlds, these people have to kill when they're, or in war in real life, sometimes you have to kill or destroy things to survive and to protect the world. Like, violence begets violence, and there's a character, Malquin, who ends up in these fighting pits, and he has to make these difficult decisions and try to decide what is the right thing to do, but he's also caught between that and trying to survive. So I think there's a lot more blood and gore in this book, especially with the fighting pits. And there's characters I love, but there are characters that I hate. And John Gwynne is so good, and I'm sure you probably heard this before, because this is one of, this is a book that has been talked about, this series has been talked about by a lot of fantasy readers, that John Gwynne is really good at fighting scenes, and you can picture them really easily, and the series is so good. It gets a little tropey, but it's still really good, if you like, these epic fantasies, and I think, if you get past tropiness, then I think this is really good. I will be reading the next book, the third book. I don't know when, but I don't want to rush it until I get the fourth book, which maybe hopefully I'll get for my birthday, because my birthday is coming up in a few weeks. So that was so bad. I'm a little apprehensive, but I don't think I could do a separate review on that book other than what I just did there. And that might have to do with me spacing out the books when I'm reading, something like that, spacing out the reading. And then I have 2 more books to talk about, so, out of books that I read. So the next one is, oh, wait, I forgot, before I talk about that one, I reread the Diviner series by Libba Bray. I read that on ebook. So I read the first book years ago, but I got impatient with waiting for the second book. So I kind of moved on from it. Then one day, I saw some friends of ours had a copy of the second book, and they were getting ready to move, so they were getting rid of some of their books, and they gave me a copy of because they knew I was a reader, they gave me a lot of their books, and the second book, Lair of Dreams, in the Diviner series, was in that collection, so I got it. And then I was, think I need to reread this, so I kept an eye out for the book. I didn't want to buy it just yet. Although I probably will now. So I found it on Libby. And but I guess I don't have the audiobook, which I've heard is really good. The narrator is good, especially with the bad guy, making him really creepy and stuff. And so I read it, I read the ebook, and it is still just as good as remember. I didn't remember a lot, but I remembered bits and pieces of the original story. I remember, like, about who the bad guy was. I remember a little bit of that. I remember Evie had the power and stuff like that. So this is set in one of my favorite time periods, the 1920s, in New York City. And Evie has a gift. She's a psychometry. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but basically she can touch an object that belongs to a person and have visions of them in their life, see things about them, like what they ate for breakfast, what they were thinking about, stuff like that. But of course, no one believes her in her back in her home of Ohio, small town Ohio. And she's also a bit of a party girl. She's a bit of a wild child, and people just see her gift as another way to get attention, and she's just messing with people and having fun. And she ends up, during a party, she ends up doing this trick on this boy that she knows that has flirted with her before. But he's engaged, and she finds out from touching something that belongs to him that he's having an affair. He's cheating on his girlfriend, who I think is his fiance. And so her parents are just, that's it, we've had enough. They don't believe her. They think she was just messing with him, trying to make this boy look bad. So they sent her to New York to live with her Uncle Will, who owns an occult museum. But she actually sees this opportunity to have some fun because it's New York. There's other flappers that see, like her. There's the theater. There's parties. There's speakeasies. There's a lot more drinking. No parent supervision. Because she thinks her uncle will not care. He's the absent-minded professor. He only cares about his work. But when she gets there, even though she starts to have fun at first, things take a turn because she and her uncle get embroiled in a murder mystery with a killer that uses religion and occult symbols to murder people. And Evie and her uncle investigate. And they receive help from Uncle Will's assistant Jericho, the brooding but handsome with, his own secrets, Jericho, and who Evie's best friend Mabel has a crush on. And then the charming, charismatic thief, Sam Lloyd, who Evie met when she first got there. And so the fun begins. And first of all, the fact that these having supernatural gifts. I love when stories that characters having supernatural gifts. Like if it's, fantasy gets me every time. And when it's like, I love the idea of these characters having these special gifts. And also, I think at the time when I first read it, was one of these things where it was a little different. It was characters having gifts. It wasn't just vampires and witches and stuff like that. It was like it was a bit different when I first read it. It was historical. You're dealing with people that just happen to be connected with the supernatural world, or diviners, as they call them in the book. And so also, I felt such sympathy for Evie's character. Like, first, I know that a lot of people don't love Evie's character, but I actually adore Evie. I think she's so relatable, and she was very different than a usual protagonist. She's very vain, a bit selfish. She's more than a bit selfish. But she has good intentions. She tries to help people, but doesn't think about what they want. She thinks about what she thinks is best for them. Like, she tries to help her friend Mabel, who is a bit of a, she's a good girl. She hasn't, gone along with all the new trends and stuff. Her parents are activists, so she goes along with what her mom wants. And she's kind of very cautious and doesn't try anything. And Evie just wants her to experience the world around her, to live her own life and become, her own person. But Evie kind of tries to turn her into herself or make her into a party girl, and that's just not who Mabel is. But I kind of see Evie's point, because Mabel was always playing it safe, and was always following behind her mom, within her mom's shadow, her parents' shadow, and even Jericho points that out. She's never done her own thing. It's like, she speaks for her parents. Whatever her parents say is what comes out of her own mouth. And even Jericho points that out to her. And, like, I get that you can't just force yourself on someone, and you can't just try to turn them to you, or you have to decide, do they want this? And I don't think Evie always considers, like, she loves Mabel, and she cares about her, and wants to do what's best for her, but she doesn't always consider what Evie wants. I mean, what Mabel wants. But I do love their dynamic and their friendship. I also love her relationship with Theda Knight, who also has her own little secrets, and who's also charming, is charismatic, and so is her best friend Henry, who's a piano player, writes music. And there's so many great, charming characters in the story. Like, even the villain is so much fun, he's so deliciously evil and scary. And I love that it's set, first of all, like, again, 1920s New York. I love that. First of all, I think most people love the Roaring Twenties because it's so fun and exciting, and the flappers and stuff, and the media has a way of making it like really thrilling and fun. It's such an exciting time period in our history. And it's, especially for younger people, like in their 20s and teens, because there was so much forbidden aspects, but, people, like, got away with it, and it was just, it's fun, and, I think a lot of young people can relate to those limitations that were put upon people in the 20s, like with the prohibition, and the older generation judging them for, wearing too short of a skirt, and, the short hair and stuff like that. Nowadays, having short hair is not, even having a pixie cut, like, I did at one time, my pixie cut is, like, not a big deal. But I love the culture of New York. It's like 10, 20 years, like, it's the third generation after the immigration generation, all the immigrants, so there's so much culture in New York. It's, like, still developing at this time, and people from different walks of life, different countries, like, Sam Lloyd, one of Evie's love interests, the thief, he's Polish. And there's also, Memphis is an African-American character, which he's one of my favorite characters, and he's a healer, and he has this great, has this very endearing relationship with his little brother, who I believe has the gift of premonition, and you have, see who else, and, like, there is a character that I think is mentioned in the book she wasn't a major character in this one, but I think she plays a major character in the next book, going by her gift in the title of the next book. And she's Chinese American. They're like, and then Henry Du Bois is a queer character. So there's so much diversity. I feel like there's a lot of diversity in this book, and the antagonist is so creepy and fun, and I'm really fascinated by stories that look at the darker side of religion and the fanatics, and how that people will go so far with religion to the point of they'll do anything to prove themselves right. There's like a scene when Evie and Jericho are walking past a group of, these people of the religious group, and this little boy, he's probably like 10, 11, or, a teenager, and he sees her, and I guess she's dressed in something that's a little too bright and maybe, a little too short for them. And they're like, he calls her, this kid who's a teenager, or like a young boy. I don't remember how old he was, but he was really young. And he was like, harlot, you're a harlot, pointing to Evie. And she did have a confrontation with an awkward encounter with these people. And so it's like, oh my God, you're just a kid. You're so vulnerable. And you've been manipulated by this group of people. You don't even know Evie. You probably don't even know the definition of a harlot. And you don't know anything about Evie, and that scene just broke my heart, especially because this was a kid that calling her this. And it really hurt her. It really upset her because she was just walking by. She wasn't doing anything. She wasn't even doing anything that implied like that she might be a harlot. Um, and it's just the fanaticism of these groups of people who so believe in their cause they will do anything, and they will say anything and they will claim, say anything to justify themselves, to be like, well, it's okay because it's the name of this. And it's so disturbing. But this is so good. This is the great first book in the start of the series. I'm gonna read the next book soon. I don't know when. As soon as I finished the first book, I was like, oh, I want to read now. But then I remembered, wait, I'm in the middle of some other books, so probably should finish those first. Which brings me to the next book. The next book I read was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. So the first time I heard about Jules Verne actually was in my favorite sci-fi movie trilogy, Back to the Future. Doc Brown is a huge fan of Jules Verne. He even, spoiler alert, names his two boys, because he has kids by the end of the movie trilogy. He names them Jules and Verne, which my first hunt was, Jules sounds like a girl name. Which, although the author's name is Jules, his first name is Jules, so I do think it's, but in American, I think Jules is a girl name. So I can understand. I don't think this would be everybody's cup of tea. This is, and neither would the next book I'm going to talk about. One of the library books I got. So this takes place in the 1800s, and this French professor has come home from, and Professor Aronnax, I think that's how you say it. He has found out that there is something that's been hitting all the boats on the water and has been causing trouble all around the world, and everyone suspects it's a giant fish or something in the water. And Aronnax and his servant, Council, I don't know if I'm saying the Consul, I do not know how to say his name. I'm going to watch the adaptation if it's on Disney Plus, because the adaptation was made by Disney. Go accompany this crew to go hunting for this giant fish. And along for the ride is this Canadian harpooner, Ned Land. And during their voyage, they end up falling into the ocean, almost drowning, but they are rescued by a submarine. And of course, at the time, submarines, I don't think this was the first submarine that ever existed, I think. And that's the giant fish that supposedly has been hitting all the ships and causing all these problems. Like I said, and it is led by Captain Nemo, who has renounced society. He's done with society. And I believe he's Indian. So I imagine that comes from his desire for revenge, renouncing society comes from experiencing a lot of horrible racism. And, now I don't know the history, of India and all that stuff, so it's probably a lot more than that. And he's like, I won't throw you overboard, but you're my prisoners, and you can't go back on land, and you have to basically go along with me, stay here for the rest of your life on my submarine. And Aronnax is actually cool with this because he is passionate about the ocean as well and thinks, oh, I get to explore all around the ocean and stuff and publish my book one day. And his servant, who's probably has not a lot of life experiences, doesn't go on a lot of adventures, probably doesn't have a lot of relationships except for with the professor, is cool with this too. But Ned Land, at first he's like, okay, whatever. And then he starts to get a little bit of cabin fever and is not too keen on this trip. And is desperate to escape because he has not forgotten that they're prisoners, and he's not passionate about this kind of stuff. He doesn't care about the ocean unless he can hunt the fish in the water. So I didn't hate this book, but I didn't love it either. I thought it was pretty interesting, and I loved exploring the ocean. I thought that was really cool, and I think it provides a lot of great visuals, and like I said, I'm eager to watch the adaptation because I think it'd be so great to see the submarine underwater and just see all the beautiful fish and learn about the ocean. But unless you really are interested in that, in some capacity, or, whether you are extremely passionate about it or not, I don't think you're going to love this book. Because it spends a lot of time learning about fish, talking about fish, and getting the observations about all the sea creatures and their experiences walking on the water. But that's it. Not a lot of action happens. We do get some action scenes, but only like 3 throughout the whole book. And they're closer to the end of the book. Now, I do have a soft spot for the stories told through academic characters, because I don't know, I'm a little jealous of those characters. I want to be those characters sometimes, and so I kind of have a soft spot for them, and they're also can be kind of endearing and charming. I mean, but they can also get boring after a while, especially if they spend their whole time just talking and making observations and stuff. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Gulliver's Travels, a little bit, the way it's told. The difference is this is not a satire, it's a sci-fi adventure story. Which on the surface, yeah, but when you get going, it's like, adventure stories are supposed to have action scenes, and there's supposed to be tension, which I think Verne tried to build tension, but it wasn't very successful in my opinion. I was also disappointed by Captain Nemo's character. I mean, he was kind of interesting, but then he fizzled out. Like, it was mostly 2 scientists talking and philosophizing in me, like, sharing history and just, like, I mean, we need more than just these 2 guys talking and discussing the ocean. And because you're mostly in Arnox's perspective, we never, when Nemo disappeared and went off to his office or whatever, or, to sail the submarine, control the submarine, we didn't, like, I think it might have helped if it wasn't just in Arnox's perspective, because at least we could get some more of Captain Nemo, and maybe that could have helped, made things a little more interesting. Like, I think someone could do, if given, I don't know if you would have to ask permission from the people who own the rights to this book, Verne's family or whatever, but, like, I don't know what who owns the copyright of this book and his books, because I believe this is a series of books. But I think it'd be interesting to get, now maybe, granted, like I said, it's a series, so maybe you'll get more information and get to know Captain Nemo's character more in other books. But I think you could really do a spin-off where it's from Nemo's perspective and make him a little more scary. Because, like, he wasn't, I mean, towards the end, he got kind of interesting, a lot more interesting and scary towards the end of the book. But most of the time, it was just like, okay, is this guy going to do something? Is there going to be any confrontations? Except Verne, I feel like, tried to build tension, but it wasn't enough. The only character I really just absolutely loved is Ned Land. He was funny and charming, but and you could see his frustration and his anger, and you were worried he was going to snap any minute and do something. Although he never did. I mean, he came close a couple times, but, like, you get angry, but, he was always he was the most interesting character, I think. Like I said, I cannot wait until, see the adaptation, which I hear is more action-packed and exciting. There's things that are not in the book that are in the movie that they added, which I'm not surprised, because there's, like I said, there's not a lot going on. There's only a few action scenes going on in this book. And I think the Disney adaptation added more action scenes, more exciting moments. Because I think most people, today's audiences, aren't used to that more exciting action adventure throughout a whole book. And this one does not have it. Now, I respect Jules Verne in his work, and I do want to check out Journey to the Center of the Earth. Although, I don't know, I might rewatch Olive from Book Olive's review of that book, because she read that one, and it might make me a little hesitant. I don't know, because I don't remember her review being 100% positive. But, so I'm probably going to look at her review and, debate. Maybe even look at Goodreads reviews, because that's usually, that's what I do to make a decision a lot of times. Which I know, people could argue that, well, you don't know, because everyone has different opinions, and you should read the book. But it's like, I mean, unless the book was at the library, which it technically is, but it's the abridged version, and it's, the illustrated classics, which are kind of kid-friendly versions of classics, and I don't want to read that one. If I'm going to read that book, Journey to Center, I want to read the version like this. So what else can I say about this? So, so it was kind of boring. It wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't bad. I think if you really are into the whole ocean. And I'm curious because right now my nephew seems to be kind of into sea creatures and learning about the ocean stuff. Mostly sea creatures, but who knows, maybe when he gets older he'll be more into it. So he might like this. I don't know though, but he's still only 5 years old, I think. So who knows? His interest might change, but as of right now, I know that he kind of likes the ocean and learning about sea creatures, so he might like this. I don't know, but he might not. Who knows? His taste might change, but yeah. So it wasn't. So it was kind of like I said, a bit of a letdown, but not bad. And I'm glad I read this, especially because it's one of the early science fiction stories. So, now the last book is one that I was hoping to finish, but like I said, I want to film today, so I'm not quite finished with it. It is Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. So I'm not gonna give a complete review, but it's a very intriguing story, and I agree with a lot of Goodreads reviews that not everyone will love it. It's a very meandering plot, which sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Just on the length of the book and if what's going on in the book, like if there's some exciting or intriguing moments. It's basically the school, Catherine House. It's a collegiate school that everyone is dying to get into. But not everybody who applies gets into this school, which is like most colleges, I think. It has turned out a lot of successful people, a lot of scientists, artists, politicians have attended this school, and basically you give this school 3 years. No connections to nothing about your past is brought into the school. You don't interact with your family members. I mean, you can, but you need a lot of credits to be able to call and write to your family. But you basically have to devote your life to this school. And our main character, Inez, at first she doesn't like it, but then after the talk with the headmistress, she begins to kind of adapt to Catherine House, and actually is like everybody else, feels like this is her home. She feels safe here, contented here, but she knows something's not right about the school. She has her suspicions about the school. So this has a very cult-like feel to it, this book, and it's also very intriguing, and because of the cult-like feel to it. And I feel like, and one person, I don't know if reads what Cindy's review or someone else's review said, this is like a B horror movie. Like I would love to thinking about, and I totally agree with that, and I feel like I'd love to see this on screen, like either on Freeform or like on Lifetime or something, seeing a movie adaptation. Like it could work on Lifetime because it's about, our main character is a girl, is a woman, a young teenage girl, or like I said, Freeform. They used to do original movies. I don't know if they still do. Or like even if they can expand into a TV show to expand the mystery of it all. Of Catherine House and the intrigue. There's also like this thing that Catherine House is known for called plasm that they study, that it kind of makes me think of like DNA. And Inez is obsessed with this and wants to find out what it is and understand it, and why everyone else is obsessed with it. I'm close to the end. I haven't got to the end yet, but it kind of also made me think of, I can't remember what the movie was called, but I remember it used to come on late at night before Freeform became Freeform. It would come on around midnight or later, and James Marsden was in it. And it kind of had a pod people kind of plot, and it made me think of that, like a cross between that movie, which I wish I could remember it better. I mean, I guess I could look up James Marsden and find the movie. that whatever movie that was, and then mixed with like Stepford Wives or something. That's the vibe I get from this book. And like it's kind of interesting, but like I said, the plot is meandering, not a lot is happening, but it kind of builds the tension like Needful Things does, and I think I could potentially charm some people, not everybody. And Catherine, I was about to call her Catherine. Catherine is not the main character, and Nez is the main character. I think she's very relatable. Like, the indecisiveness, the introvertedness. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I know I can relate to that. And she's young. She's a teenage girl who doesn't know what to do with her life. And I think a lot of teenagers don't know what to do with their lives. And feel that way. And it's so easy to get lost in the excessiveness. And, because this book also has a lot to do with indulging in your indulgences. Like, there's one scene where the first years have a meal that consists of dessert, essentially. And first of all, as much as I love sweets, I always feel unsatisfied with sweets. Even when I eat dessert, I'm craving it, but then I always want more. Sugary foods, the bad sugary foods, and salty foods, they are made for you to crave more and continue eating more. So I wouldn't be satisfied with that kind of meal. I need an entree, like I need steak or something, or like, fish. I couldn't just eat like cake and pudding and stuff like that. But this house preys on these kids' indulgences and their vulnerabilities. They are so vulnerable, and like all their kids, like there's one scene where Inez is talking to one of her friends, and he's like, I'm happy here, and I could do well here at Catherine House, and out there in the real world, what am I gonna do? I'm not gonna be successful, I'm not gonna go anywhere in life, the world is not gonna accept me. And even Inez herself feels that way. She has very conflicting emotions, because on the one hand, she knows something's not right, and she knows that she needs to escape Catherine House. She can't live there forever. And she's, there's at least one other character who feels that way. Yaya, I think her name is. Also knows that they can't stay here forever. And she's like, I need to, but at the same time, she's actually really happy there, and she could live a happy, contented life. And she has a great, sweet boyfriend. And it's so easy to fall back into what's easy. To fall into this trap of just staying because it's safe. And it's not risking. You can't get hurt. And you can't fail. That's how Catherine House preys upon him, the desire to not fail and feeling lonely and insecure. And like I said, it preys on this occult. It's a cult, I feel like. And it's so creepy. Like, now if I was at Catherine House, maybe I would probably make the same mistakes that Inez and her friends are making and get caught up in it. But as a reader, of course, I know something's not right here. And I know you can't stay there forever. So again, it's when they sit like, I'm yelling at the book and be like, no, you dumbass, you cannot stay here. You're a coward if you stay here. But, and it's also heartbreaking that these people feel this way, that they feel like they only are going to be happy at Catherine House. So it's so interesting, this story, and I know, like I said, it's probably not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm sure there's flaws that I don't see, and some people in the Goodreads reviews were saying, you can tell this is their debut, but apparently I don't read enough to recognize that, unless it's just really obvious. But it's just really good. Like I said, it's not the best book ever. Like, if, I feel like it's somewhere in the middle where it's still really good, but I wouldn't call it the best. But it's definitely intriguing. Okay, so that's one of the library books. The other library books I got two other library books. I can grab them. So this one is one that I've heard about a lot. I decided to save this for May, so I'm not reading this right now. So the rest of these books are the books I bought. These last 8 books, or 7 books, 7 are ones that These two are from the library, and then the last 4 are the books I bought. I hope this video isn't too long. So this is one I've heard a lot about. This is one of those booktube darling authors. And at first I was, be like, whatever. I didn't have any strong feelings or any desire to read the author's work. In fact, a 7 on Sunday that I meant to do, but I totally forgot. I'm having trouble keeping up with those 7 on Sundays. I keep forgetting to do them. I used to be so good at that. Like, I was good at keeping up with, Wednesday, top 5 Wednesday. But I just kind of stopped, and it became really bad. But the most last Sunday, I think, was top 7 books, new releases that you had no interest in reading. And originally I was going to say this author's most recent work. But now here I am, borrowing from the library one of his more popular works. Let me check. Yeah, him. And that is Never Let Me Go by Kazu Ishiguro. I figured, since this is, I believe, a Japanese author, I was like, I'll save it for May, because I think May is Asian History Month, I think. I have to double check on that. So I figured I'll read this in May. And this, along with Moraines of the Day, are some of his most popular works. Ones that BookTube mostly talks about. And I did see the movie version of Remains of the Day, but I've never actually read the book. But this is the first one I saw. I don't know if that library has Remains of the Day. I might get that one. I forgot I put this in there. There were free bookmarks. This was advertising Libby, actually. So I might end up throwing it away. I don't know why I grabbed it. I mean, I don't like those kinds of bookmarks. I find them boring, and they're easily ripped. But I don't know a lot about this. I just know I've heard a lot about it. So I'm going to read this description. As a child, Kathy, now 31 years old, my age, although when I'm reading this, I'll turn 32, lived in Hailsham, a private school in scenic English countryside where the children were sheltered from the outside world, brought up to believe that they were special, and that their well-being was crucial, not only for themselves but for society, and they would eventually enter. Kathy had long ago put this idyllic past behind her, but when 2 of Hailsham friends came back into her life, she stops resisting the pull of memory. And so, as her friendship with Ruth is rekindled, and as the feelings that long ago fueled her adolescent crush on Tommy begin to deepen into love, Kathy recalls their years at Hailsham. She describes happy scenes of boys and girls growing up together, unperturbed, even comforted by their isolation. But she describes other scenes as well, of discord and misunderstanding that hint at a dark secret behind Hailsham's nurturing facade. With the dawning clarity of hindsight, the three friends are compelled to face the truth about their childhood and about their lives now. A tale of deceptive simplicity, Never Let Me Go, slowly reveals an extraordinary emotional depth and resonance, and takes its place among Kazu Ishiguro's famous work. So, that definitely made me more interested when I read that the first time. Because before, I had no interest. I didn't know what these were, but, I knew what Remains of the Day was about, because I have the movie and I've seen it. Although that might have been put in the donation pile. It's the movie, and I thought the movie was pretty good. So I knew what that was about. I didn't know what Never Let Me Go. I just know a lot of people loved it. You're either a Never Let Me Go fan or you're a Remains of the Day fan, apparently. Which I thought Remains of the Day was a classic. Classic as in a traditional classic. Like a Dickens or a Jane Austen or, J.M. Barrie or something. I did not realize that was more a modern, a more modern, let me see if I can, well, this one came out in 2005, And then, so I'm guessing that Remains of the Day came out in the 90s. I did not realize it was that young of a book. Not that the 90s anymore are that young, but still. So I'm going to read this in May, but I am going to start, and then the other book I'm going to start soon after I finish Catherine House is Odin's Child, which I assumed it had to do with the Norse god, but there's no mention in the description of the Norse god. So I read this, but I don't remember what it said. So I'm going to read what's on the back, what's on the front flap. Hakura has always been an outsider. When she summoned to Manfala for the right, she risked everyone discovering what she really is. But what choice does she have? Rhyme is the ultimate insider, destined to join the council that rules over YM. YM, I don't know how to say that. It's probably but when he learns the truth about Hakura, I'm probably not even pronouncing this right. Everything he thought he knew about his family, the council, and Yim itself is called into question. Erd is tyrannical, conniving, and cruel, and he has his sights on the council. Erd would make a pact with the devil himself if he could get him the power he craves, but nobody knows what the devil might demand in return. The fates of Hakura, Rhyme, and Erd become inextricably bonded as every day brings them closer to the right, and perhaps to the end of Yim itself. So, it's probably set in the same world as Norse mythology would be, but I don't know if there's any reference to Norse mythology. I mean, there probably is, but I don't know if they actually play a role, like the Norse gods play a role in it or not, or they play a more passive role, probably. But like I said, as soon as I saw Odin's Child, I was like, ooh, this sounds interesting. So I read the description, like I said before, and I enjoyed it. But like I said, I couldn't remember to actually tell you guys what it's about unless I read it to you. So those are my library books. Now, let's finish this up with the books I bought. Okay, first, these are them. Okay, so first the second week, I think in first or second week of the month, my dad had to go to the country bookstore, to actually trying to promote his book, or at least make the woman who owns the country bookstore aware of his book. Please check it out. Shadows of Saigon by Mark R. Anderson. So historical fiction, it's great. I hope you guys, like I said, please check it out. So he was like, why don't you come along, you can shop a little bit and stuff like that. So first book I found was one I had never heard of, but like most people, the cover drew me in, of course. That is The Glass Magician by Caroline Stevermer. Like I said, the cover is beautiful. I love swan imagery. I think that's really pretty. And I don't know if this is a series, but like her other books, titles that are mentioned in here have like College of Magic, Scholar of Magics, When the King Comes Home. Those first two books, I don't know if there's any connection to The Glass Magician, but I'll find out. This is set in early 1900s, which, if it's set in early 1900s, I'm intrigued. I'm interested because I love stories that are set then. Because you get so many stories that are 1800s or medieval period or the 1920s, which yes, that is the early 1900s, but you don't get a lot of like the Titanic era, you know? So this is New York, again, New York, 1905. I'm just gonna read the back because I think the back could do a better job. New York, 1905. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, and the Morgans. Although the Astors are gonna die on, I think, because the latest heir of the Astors, I think. Actually, no, I don't. According to my New York in 13 Miles book, I think the Astor family does continue. I think. But, I don't know if they die out with the whole Titanic thing. They are the cream of society, and they own the nation on the cusp of a new century. Dahlia Cutler doesn't come from money or have family and connections, but she knows magic. stage magic, and she dazzles the audience with her fantastical hacks. One night, a trick goes horribly awry. Thalia discovers magic beyond her stage twirls and costumes and finds her world far more enchanted and herself far more powerful than she ever imagined. To understand what she is, Thalia will have to face a New York more dangerous than any stage she's known before the real monsters descend to feast. And it just, that description really sounded really cool, and so combine that with the beautiful cover, and the fact that I never haven't heard of this book. I want to read, I definitely want to read more books that I haven't heard of, because I want to discover some of these books on my own. BookTube is a big influence on a lot of the books I've been reading the last few years, but I want to read some more that I discover because I'm interested in them, because I see them like, ooh, that sounds interesting. This sounds really cool, the idea of a stage magician discovering real magic. I think that is really cool. I've always been a fan of that kind of story where a stage magician discovers that there is real magic. I think that is really cool. I should read this with The Last Magician, because it was similar time period, it'd be great, 2 great books. Okay, so the next one I'd heard about recently, the most memorable person I heard about this book was from Sean the Book Maniac, and now, don't take my word for this, but I think he didn't love this book. I think he thought it was good, but he was a little unsatisfied with it. I think. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I would have to look at his thoughts on this book. I don't know if he did a separate review or did, one of those Friday reads or something on this book. But I think I remember him talking about it. I think I remember him being unsatisfied with it. It was one of those books that, for him, it had potential, but there was something missing. But I'm not 100% sure on that. Which I love listening to Sean the Book Maniac, though, whether we agree or not. He has such a nice, soothing voice. But he's the first person I ever talked about this book, and then I think I heard it from other people, too, or people that talked about wanting to read this. Which I think I spelled it wrong. I'll have to look on places I typed. Also National Book Award finalist. And that is Pachinko. And again, another book that I think I could read in May because of Asian American History Month. I was so happy. I got very excited when I saw this at the Rosales because I didn't think it would be there. And first I saw a book that was similar in coloring. The covers were similar, but it wasn't that one. And then I finally spotted this one. I was like, yes! And I picked it up. I was like, I have to get this one. Even if I get only one book, I'm gotta get this one. First, I love the cover design. I love how the imagery of, I don't know if this is, I'm assuming this is Korea. Or maybe it's Japan, I don't know. Because I think it takes place between Korea and Japan. Or it was around the time Japan took over Korea, I think. But I love how her kimono, which says Japanese, I don't know if Korea has a different term for these outfits, but I love how the image of the setting is in her kimono. I think that's really pretty. That's really cool. That imagery. So this is about a woman who's, let me see. Sunja. She is this young girl who falls in love with a rich guy, and gets pregnant with his child, but turns out he is married and she does not want to be his mistress. So she runs away and meets a minister passing through, and she agrees to marry him to cover up her situation. And he's a very gentle, sickly minister, he's going to Japan, and but this results in dire consequences, because she has refused to be part of the home of her son's powerful father, and it results in consequences that affect, sounds like, the whole family. That, and like most Asian stories, I think it, delves into the family saga and multiple generations. Like Amy Tan's books do the same thing. Where particularly focused with a particular heavy focus on mother-daughter relationships. And this just sounded so good to me, I mean, I don't know, I'm probably not going to feel the same way Sean the Bookmaniac did, because I'm a lot more, I'm someone that's super easy to please, and even if other people, and I won't notice things that other readers might notice, that things that other readers won't like. I mean, I don't, like, I have my limits, but, I mean, it's a very small limitations. But it's just, and so far I've read up to chapter 4. It does go through things quickly. We met the father, and I didn't realize he wasn't gonna, this is in the first couple chapters, that the father, Sunja's father, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, the crippled fisherman, he dies early on. She never really gets to meet her father, or she's really young when he dies. So I didn't realize that. I thought he was going to play a bigger role in the story. But no, he dies early on. So I was kind of surprised by that. Especially going by the first sentence, like, the adored daughter of a crippled fisherman. And we don't really see her relationship. Maybe we'll get in flashbacks, but so far I haven't seen any of her relationship with the rich guy, the rich married dude. We don't get that relationship. So I'm kind of surprised by that. But maybe we'll get that in flashbacks, I don't know. But so far it's really good. I'm very intrigued by it. I figured I'd start this now. So that's the other book I got. And let's talk about the books I got from the roast office. I finally went back to the roast office, the roast office and the library have both been open, but their hours were limited. So finally they're back to regular hours. You still have to wear your mask, and there is sanitizer out for you to use. So they're still very careful, and they're limited how much you can bring in, because the roast office takes donations. That's how their book collection grows, is via donations. And so finally they opened back to regular hours again, opened every day except for Sundays. It's still not open on Sundays. And it opens at 9 or 10? I think 10, and then closes at 5. So the first one I got is a classic, and that is The Ghost Stories of Edith Wharton. I have enjoyed Edith Wharton so far. I've become a fan of hers and her work. Her writing is beautiful, and I thought this would be perfect. I couldn't decide. I was like, I should get this, especially because I already like Edith Wharton, so I'm probably gonna enjoy this. I thought this would be good for like reading in October. So some of the stories in here are The Lady's Maid's Bell, The Triumph of Night, Bewitched, Mr. Jones, The Looking Glass, All Souls, and The Eyes. So this is ghost stories. So each story, I'm assuming, involves a ghost. It's just, and I thought this would be perfect. Like, I love Edith Wharton already. I do want to read her other book. Is there a picture in here? Yeah, there's artwork in here. There's a sketch. I don't know if there's any more, that's the only one, but, and I'm definitely getting more into short stories. I think short stories that are scary work well a lot more, because they're, like, sometimes the shortness of a horror story is even more, interesting, because it makes it a little bit more scarier, which is what the horror stories are supposed to do. They're supposed to scare you. So I think the mystery of it, a horror story having, like, being really short could make it even more, like, scary and make you even more intrigued by it and wondering, what just happened, or, and to think about it more. I think the shortness of a horse can make you think about it more because it just ends all of a sudden. It's like, I feel like length can really impact how a story influences you. So I chose this one so I could have more Edith Wharton in my collection. And the last one I ended up buying was a book that I had got from the library years ago. I had borrowed from the library a couple years ago, but it's a chunker book. It's a long book. It's like 900 pages, I think, 900 or 800 pages. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna, for now, give this book back to the library. Maybe I'll read it one day, maybe not. I'm hesitant to say this, but it was kind of a DNF. And I'm hesitant because I've explained to people that DNFs for me are permanent. That to me, that if you're going to DNF a book, that means you're permanently not going to ever come back to it. Because to me that makes sense, saying you did not finish, so you're not going to finish it ever. So basically, but it is easier to say, oh, I DNF this book for now, but I'm going to come, it's just because it's DNF, very simple to say. And, but most of my DNFs, if not all, I don't come back to. And if I'm going to come back to it, I just call them the bookmarked books. Books I'm started to read, but I decided to step back from them for now. And unfortunately, I have a lot of those, as I talked about in the Moody Reader tag. So, this was one that I recently saw like a teaser or something for the movie that was going to be made into a TV show or something starring Eva Green, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So I was like, ooh, because I love Eva Green, and and I've been hearing a lot more about it lately, and it's like a lot more interesting than I expected it to be. And when I had been looking for this book for a while to buy it, it was not at Books A Million, My Books A Million. I was very disappointed by that. And I kept looking, and I think I vaguely recall seeing it at the Rose office before. But I decided not to buy it. I had passed it up, which now I regret, because that happens a lot, where I decide not to buy a book, and then one day I decide I'm interested in it, and then it is not there. Because that's how it is with those kinds of bookshops. It's kind of like the same, it makes me think of what Steve Donahue says about the book battle. If you go there with a plan in a certain book in mind, then you're not going to find it. I think it's the same way with the Roast office. I think that's how it is with probably a lot of used bookstores. There's, that, they have a lot of interesting books, but there's no guarantee you're going to find it. If you're looking for a specific book, there's no guarantee it's going to be there. And then, surprise, surprise, this book, I saw it, and I immediately was like, oh my god, I have to grab it. And I bought it. I was like, I'm definitely, even if I just buy one book, this is going to be the book. It was the same thing with the whole Pachinko situation. Even if I just buy one book, it has to be this book at least. And that is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. So, I did consider getting it for the library again, but, as you can see, it's a long book. And, but I got it in, ooh, I didn't notice this. I guess this is the same woman in the images on which I bet with the hardback one, how hardback sometimes they have that extra encasing, and then when you lift it, and these are like holes in the cover, like there's holes in the cover that are part of the design in that image. So it's probably like that with the hardback book. I don't remember seen that before, but I bet you that's the case. It won the Man Booker Prize, and I think it's a lot more fantastical, like at least magical realism than I realized. I could be off there, but and I think it's a story within a story. Because the beginning kind of threw me off, because I assumed it was going to be fantasy, going by the title. But, yeah, so it just sounded, it got me, I got excited about it all over again, and I saw it and I was very happy just seeing at the, 830, so 800 pages, a little over 800 pages, and I just got excited about this book all over again, and I love the coloring, the blue, the gold, and then the bright blue, dark bluish color. I think that's really pretty. And now that I have the book, I can take my time with it and really get to know this book. I just don't like the pressure of books this size, getting those from the library and then feeling like this pressure to finish it. Because even though, yes, I can renew the book, I know this book is going to take me a while, and I can't just take my time with it. Which, as you've seen before, I will take my time with books this size. I will take forever to read them, so I don't like that kind of pressure. Now, if it's a book like this, where, yes, it's a huge book, but it was in the young adult section, and each chapter is really short, and just the pacing of it is a lot more fast-paced. And like this one, I feel like it's going to be a more literary book and a more character-driven story, while this, I'm assuming, is going to be more plot-driven. So it's going to be more fast-paced, and, it won't spend a huge amount of time, but you'll get to know the characters, and they'll be developed, of course, but you won't spend as much time with all these little details that you're like, is this irrelevant? When is this going to get relevant? Like, I love these kinds of books, but they do take me forever to read. And I'm pointing to this one still. So yeah. So I'm probably going to get through this one quickly, but, this one will probably take me forever. And I keep thinking about it and looking at it and be like, I want to read this now. But then I keep thinking about all the books I've had for so long that I need to. This always happens. I get a new book, I get excited to read it, but then I'm like, but I have all these other books I've had for so long and I need to read those. And which I'm sure my mom's solution would probably be, don't buy any more books, but that's probably, in all honesty, that's probably not going to happen. I realize I have a bit of a problem. And like I said, you guys might find that cute, but she doesn't, but they won't. But anyway, so that's how my April reading went. I'm going to finish Catherine House this month, maybe today, ideally. I mean, it looks like I can, I don't have that much more to go. But I wanted to talk about, how do my wrap up. I really hope this video was not too long and you guys weren't too bored by it. I tried to be efficient and succinct with this video and not get off topic too much. Like I said, I hope this, so if you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you're interested, and if you want to know when I post new videos, click the bell icon to be notified. I will post all the links of everything that I'm a part, all the other social networks that I'm on, and I hope you are continuing to wear your mask and washing your hands and sanitizing, staying 6 feet apart from people, because we are not out of the woods yet. Although we are getting there slowly. In fact, I've heard that we might, here in our Moore County, we might not have to wear a mask anymore. But anyway, and like I said, we're not out of the woods yet, so we still be cautious. And I hope you are enjoying your reading, and I will talk to y'all later. Alright, bye!